There is a lake in Tanzania where the dead do not rot. They turn to stone, wings frozen mid-flight, beaks locked open. Perfectly preserved mineral statues scattered across a blood-red shoreline like some kind of prehistoric graveyard. Except these are not fossils. These birds died last week, last month, last year. And the water that killed them is the same water, keeping them pristine, calcified, desiccated, and harder than bone. Welcome to Lake Natron. And here's the thing that will break your brain. This is not a dead zone. This is one of the most important breeding grounds for flamingos in the entire world. Millions of them, living, feeding, and raising their young in water that would burn your skin off in minutes. Smash that like button right now, because we are about to explore one of the most beautiful and hostile bodies of water on Earth. A place where the chemistry is so extreme, it turns flesh into stone, and you are not ready for how something this deadly became the safest place on the planet for an entire species. Let's drop. We begin in northern Tanzania, in the East African Rift Valley. Lake Natron sits at the base of Ol Duino Lengai, an active volcano whose name means Mountain of God in the Maasai language. And that volcano is the reason this lake exists. Ol Duino Lengai is the only active volcano on Earth that erupts nitrocarbonatite lava. Lava so rich in sodium carbonate that it looks white instead of red when it flows. When it rains, water washes this volcanic ash down into the lake basin. The lake has no outlet. Water flows in, but it does not flow out. So everything dissolved in that water, sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate salt, just concentrates year after year, century after century, for thousands of years. The result is a lake with chemistry so extreme it should not support life. The pH ranges between 9 and 12, depending on the season. For reference, pure water is pH 7. Your blood is pH 7.4. Seawater is pH 8. Bleach is pH 12. Lake Natron is liquid bleach heated to 60 degrees Celsius, 140 Fahrenheit in some sections. And it is not just hot and alkaline. It is saturated with salts. Sodium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, haloarchaea. The water is so mineral-rich that it crystallizes on contact with air, forming salt crusts along the shoreline that crunch under your feet like broken glass. Now here is what most people think when they see the famous photographs. They think the lake turns animals to stone instantly, like Medusa's gaze. Touch the water, freeze, done. That story is wrong. Let me show you what actually happens. An animal, a bat, a bird, a small mammal, crashes into the lake. Maybe it was flying at night and misjudged the surface. Maybe it was fleeing a predator. Maybe it was just unlucky. The water does not kill instantly. The animal drowns or dies from heat shock, or alkaline burns over the course of minutes to hours, depending on the species and the water temperature. And then the chemistry takes over. Sodium carbonate is a powerful desiccant. It strips moisture from organic tissue. At the same time, the high pH breaks down fats and proteins, essentially beginning a chemical embalming process. The minerals in the water, calcium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, begin to precipitate onto the body, coating it in a thin layer of salt crystals. Over days and weeks, this layer thickens. The body dries out completely. Soft tissue hardens. Feathers stiffen. And what you are left with is a calcified mummy. Not stone, technically. A mineral crust wrapped around a desiccated corpse. But it looks like stone. Feels like stone. And it lasts for years without decaying. The photographs that went viral in 2013 were taken by Nick Brandt, a photographer documenting environmental destruction in East Africa. He found dozens of these calcified animals washed up on the shore, birds, bats, fish, eagles, and posed them in lifelike positions. wings spread, heads raised. Standing upright on branches, he placed in the salt flats. The images look like sculptures, like someone carved these creatures out of marble and left them by the water's edge. But they are real. Every feather, every claw, every detail preserved by chemistry alone. And here is where the story twists into something stranger. Lake Natron is not a graveyard. It is a sanctuary. This same water that calcifies the dead is the reason 2.5 million lesser flamingos breed here. 75% of the world's lesser flamingo population. They are born here. They feed here. They survive here. In water, that would kill almost anything else. So what makes flamingos immune to a lake that turns other birds into statues? Let me show you how evolution solved an impossible problem. Flamingos are not immune to the alkalinity. Their skin would burn just like yours. But they have evolved a series of adaptations so specific, so perfectly tuned to this environment, that Lake Natron went from being the most hostile place on Earth for birds to being the safest. Start with their legs. Flamingo legs are covered in thick, scaly skin, similar to reptile scales. This creates a barrier between the alkaline water and their flesh. The scales are constantly being replaced, sloughing off and regenerating. So even if the outer layer gets damaged by the caustic water, fresh skin is always growing underneath. But the real genius is in their behavior. Flamingos do not wade into the deep, hot sections of the lake. They stay in the shallows, where the water is cooler and slightly less alkaline. And they are constantly moving. They do not stand still for hours like herons. They walk, they feed, they shift position, which prevents prolonged chemical burns on any single part of their leg. When they do rest, they pull one leg up into their feathers, alternating which leg is submerged. This gives each leg time to recover while the other one works. Then there is their feeding strategy. Lesser flamingos eat spirulina, a type of cyanobacteria that thrives in alkaline water. Most animals cannot digest spirulina. It contains toxins that would kill fish, birds, mammals, but flamingos have specialized digestive enzymes that break down these toxins and extract nutrients. They are feeding on something nothing else can eat. In water, nothing else can tolerate. Zero competition. And spirulina blooms in Lake Natron because the alkalinity kills everything that would normally eat it. The lake is a monoculture. Just spirulina and flamingos. A perfect evolutionary partnership. But here is the strangest part. The reason flamingos breed here has nothing to do with food. It is about safety. Lake Natron is a fortress. The water is so hostile that predators cannot reach the nesting sites. Jackals, hyenas, eagles, none of them can wade through caustic water heated to 60 degrees. So flamingos build their nests on salt islands in the middle of the lake. Mounds of hardened salt and mud that rise just above the waterline. The chicks hatch there, surrounded by water that would kill anything trying to reach them. And for the first few weeks of life, those chicks are safe in a way almost no other bird species experiences. Except the lake is not stable. The water level fluctuates wildly depending on rainfall. During the dry season, sections of the lake evaporate completely, leaving vast salt flats. The remaining water becomes even more concentrated, even more alkaline. Temperatures spike. And if a heat wave hits during breeding season, the flamingos face a crisis. In 2006, researchers documented a mass die-off. Thousands of flamingo chicks trapped on salt islands as the water level dropped. The shallow channels they needed to walk through to reach food became too alkaline, too hot. The chicks could not cross, and they could not fly yet, so they died. Dehydrated, starved, calcified by the same chemistry that was supposed to protect them. The images from that event are haunting. rows of tiny flamingo corpses, perfectly preserved, standing upright on the salt flats like an army of stone sentinels. Their pink feathers bleached white by the sun and salt. Their legs locked in place by mineral crusts. They look like sculptures, like someone built a memorial to birds that never existed. But they were real. And the lake killed them not with malice, but with indifference. Chemistry does not care about life. It just happens. And if you are in the wrong place, when the conditions shift, you become part of the geology. Now let me show you what the lake looks like from above, because that is when the full alien nature of this place becomes clear. From the ground, Lake Natron looks red. The colour comes from cyanobacteria and halophilic microorganisms, extremophile bacteria that thrive in high salt, high alkalinity environments. These bacteria produce pigments to protect themselves from UV radiation, and those pigments turn the water shades of red, orange and pink, depending on the season and the bacterial bloom density. During peak bloom, sections of the lake look like pools of blood. Bright crimson water stretching for kilometres, broken only by white salt islands. But from satellite images, the patterns are even stranger. The lake forms fractal-like shapes, branches, spirals, dendritic networks, as salt deposits crystallise along evaporation boundaries. The reds and whites create natural art on a scale you can see from space. NASA has photographed Lake Natron multiple times because the colours are so vivid and so unusual that scientists initially thought the images were false colour composites. They were not. The lake actually looks like that. A blood-red eye in the Rift Valley, surrounded by black volcanic rock and tan desert, shimmering under the equatorial sun. And the smell. Every account from researchers who have visited describes the same thing, the smell of ammonia and sulfur. Sharp, acrid, chemical, the kind of smell that makes your eyes water and your throat close. It is the smell of bacterial decay and mineral reactions happening at an accelerated rate because of the heat and alkalinity. Organic matter breaks down in hours instead of weeks. Microorganisms reproduce and die in massive blooms. The entire lake is a chemical engine running at full speed, and the byproducts hang in the air like a warning. But people do live near Lake Natron. The Maasai people have grazed cattle in the surrounding areas for centuries. They know the lake. They know which sections are safe to approach and which will burn your skin. They collect salt from the crusts to trade, and they have stories about the lake. Stories of animals turned to stone, of spirits living in the water, of the mountain of God watching over everything. To them, the lake is not a curiosity, it is sacred. Dangerous, yes, but sacred. A place where the earth shows its power without apology. And they are right. Lake Natron is power. Raw, chemical, geological power operating on timescales and intensities that make human life look fragile and brief. The lake has been here for thousands of years. It will be here for thousands more. The flamingos know this. They have evolved alongside it. They have learned to use its hostility as a shield, but everything else that touches the water and fails to adapt becomes part of the mineral record. Calcified, preserved, frozen in time. Let me pull back and show you why this matters. Lake Natron is not just a strange lake in Tanzania. It is a window into how life and chemistry interact at the extremes. The fact that flamingos thrive here tells us that evolution is not about finding comfortable environments. It is about finding empty niches and filling them, no matter how hostile they seem. The fact that other animals get calcified tells us that chemistry does not stop for death. Preservation is just another chemical process, and under the right conditions, a corpse can last longer than the ecosystem it died in. The lake is a laboratory, a natural experiment in extremophile biology, alkaline chemistry, and the boundaries of where life can exist, and it is fragile. Climate change is altering rainfall patterns in East Africa. Droughts are lasting longer. Wet seasons are becoming unpredictable. If Lake Natron dries up, or if the water chemistry shifts just a few degrees in pH, the flamingos lose their fortress. And 75% of the world's lesser flamingo population loses its breeding ground. That is not a local extinction event. That is a global crisis for a species. So here is the final truth Lake Natron forces us to accept. Beauty and death are not opposites. They are partners. The same chemistry that creates blood-red water and crystalline salt flats also creates calcified corpses. The same isolation that protects flamingos also traps their chicks when conditions shift. The lake does not choose, it just is. And everything that enters it must either adapt or become stone. You live on a planet that builds death traps more beautiful than anything we could design and fills them with life anyway. And until someone photographed calcified birds on a shoreline in Tanzania, most of us had no idea chemistry could do this to flesh. If this video shattered your understanding of what life and death look like at the extremes, hit that like button so hard the algorithm feels the alkaline burn of pH 12. Subscribe, because next week we are exploring the bloodfalls of Antarctica, where red water pours out of a glacier, and the science behind it is even stranger than it looks. Tell me in the comments if you could walk the shores of Lake Natron and see the calcified animals in person, knowing the air smells like ammonia and the ground could burn through your boots. Would you go? Thank you for descending with me. I will see you in the dark.